Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Eruvin Daf Test Zayin has two primary sugyas. The Daf is divided in half by a Mishnah. The first half is discussing machlokes between Rav Papa and Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua about a situation where gaps and walls are exactly even. We know the rule of Oimid Merubal HaParetz and Paretz Merubal Oimid, that if you have more gaps, if you have a wall that's filled with gaps or has one gap, if the area of the gaps is larger than the area of wall, then the walls are canceled by the gaps. And if it's the other way, if the walls are larger than the gaps, then the gaps are canceled by the walls. Either way, whatever is larger rules the day. The question is, what if it's exactly half and half? That's the machlokes between Rav Papa, who says that it's mutter. There it's okay, we go with the walls win. And Rav Huna, who says that the gaps win, and it's like it's not there. Okay, that's that machlokes. The Gemara is going to bring three proofs to that machlokes. The first one and the last one are relatively short and simple. The middle one is a long and complex brisa with a long discussion as to how each Amir understands it, and then a discussion about who is the author of this brisa, who does it fit with. Then we get to the next sugya, which is based off the next Mishnah, and that's where you have horizontal beams, horizontal ropes stretched around the camp, and you want to discuss whether you can have gaps between the ropes when they're horizontal. So we'll get to that. Okay, so first of all, we have this machlokes between Rav Papa and Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua. According to Rav Papa, if it's exactly 50% wall and 50% gap, it's good. And according to Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua, it's no good. So Gemara looks for proofs about it. So first of all, the Gemara is bringing a proof from a brisa, which is similar to the Mishnah we just read, which says if you have a caravan of people traveling and they camp for Shabbos, and they build a wall around their encampment, and they make the wall out of camels, saddles, saddle blankets, reeds, packages, and bundles of vegetables. All these things are used to make up the wall. Then you're allowed to carry within this wall as long as, listen carefully to the language, as long as you do not have enough space between two camels to fit another camel. So that sounds like the space, if the space is exactly the size of a camel, meaning it's equal to the wall that's surrounding it. The space is the size of a camel and it's between two camels, so it's equal to the wall that's surrounded. Then you have a problem. That is a proof to Rav Huna Breda of Yeshua. So Mercer Rav Papa will explain, no, this means it's enough for you to put a camel into that spot. In order to be able to fit a camel in and actually move him in and move him out, you need slightly more space. So therefore you'll end up with slightly more space than you had before. Okay, end of raya. Now we get to the next raya, and this is the complicated brisa. This is from Hilchos Kelayim. It's a brisa Mezachas Kelayim. It's discussing a wall which is meant to separate between two fields, one of which contains grapes, one of which contains vegetables. Those aren't allowed to be in the same field. And if you have a wall dividing them, that would be enough to make it mutter to plant vegetables on one side and grapes on the other side. And the question is, what counts as a wall? What's a good wall? How many gaps is a problem? And in what situation are you allowed to plant next to the walls, even if there are gaps? So the brisa says there's three levels. This is not me telling you there's levels. The brisa tells you there are three levels. There are more than three levels because the levels have sub-levels. But there are three general areas of halacha involved over here. Area number one is lavud. Area number two is Oimid Merubal HaParetz, which is our discussion of gaps and walls. And area number three is if you have a break, which is 10 amos or larger. So let's divide it up. Those are the three levels. Let's divide it up one at a time. As long as your issue is lavud, it doesn't matter even if you have way more gap than wall. Lavud means that you have a bunch of strings or sticks or whatever it is. It doesn't matter how thick your pieces of wall are. They could be very thin. And you can have lots of gap between them as long as the gap is less than 3 tfachim. As long as the gap is less than 3 tfachim, doesn't matter how big your walls are, and even if you have 1,000 times more airspace than wall, the strings connect, and it's considered to be solid wall. As long as the gaps are less than 3 tfachim, it's all solid wall. You can plant on both sides, no problem. Once the gap is 3 tfachim, there's no more lavud. Now, you need to have a situation where you have more wall than gap. So the brisa breaks it up into two levels depending on how thick your wall pieces are. If your wall pieces are 3 tfachim, all the way up to just below 4 tfachim, then if you have more wall than gap, it's okay, and you're allowed to plant on either side. If you have more gap than wall, it's problematic, and you're not even allowed to plant where you have wall. Even the wall is canceled by the gaps, and I'll plant where you have wall. However, from 4 tfachim all the way up to 10 amos, that's a much more significant piece of wall. Meaning if your pieces of wall are 4 tfachim wide, all the way up to 10 amas wide, then you have much more significant pieces. And the halacha is as follows. If you have more wall than gap, it's fine. You can plant wherever you want. If you have more gap than wall, it's problematic because you have more gap than wall. But here you're allowed to plant at least on the other side of the actual wall pieces. You can't plant by the gaps, but you can plant by the wall piece. That's the difference between the 3 tfachim range, 3 to 4, and 4 and up. 3 to 4, you're not allowed to plant even next to the wall pieces, even behind the wall pieces if you have more gap than wall. But from 4 to 10 amas, you're allowed to plant behind the wall even if you have more gap than wall. In both those cases, from 3 through 4 all the way up to 10, it goes by whether you have more gap than wall or more wall than gap. What does it say if you have 50-50? We'll get to that when we finish the brisa. Let's first finish the brisa. The rest of the brisa says that if it's 10 amas or larger, that means the gap is 10 amas or larger. So then even if you have wall that's more than gap, still it's no good. A gap of 10 amas is not a doorway. It's too big to be a doorway, and you're not allowed to plant next to the gap. The gap is not considered closed unless you have tzuras pesach. You stick 2 beams in the floor and you run a vine across the top of them. That's a tzuras pesach. That's fine. You're allowed to plant an opposite size of tzuras pesach. Counts as a wall. Now, what was the language about 50-50? So the Brisa's language was contradictory. First, it said that if it's 50-50, it's a problem. It's a problem. On each level, if it's 50-50, it's considered like you have more gap than wall. But then it says the opposite. Then it says if you have more gap than wall, it's problematic. And it says if you have more wall than gap, then it's okay. So it's somewhat contradictory. So each one will explain it his way. Rav Papa says when it says 50-50, it means in order to be able to fit it in, like we said earlier in the previous kasha and teretz, in order to be able to fit in a piece of the same size, which is slightly more. And it means exactly, and it's problematic if it's 50-50. Now the Gemara notes that we have contradictory language because it says that if it's more gap than wall, it's bad. If it's more wall than gap, it's good. That's contradictory indications as to what happens if it's middle, if it's exactly 50-50. So each, Amir again understands it his way. Each one says, no, when we said more one than the other, we just used the language of more, even though it could have been 50-50, because in the other half we were talking about more, right? So Rav Papa, who will say that 50-50 is good, will tell you that the reason why it said that you need to have more wall than gap to be good is because the other way, when we said you need to have more gap than wall to be bad, we said more blank than blank, because here we also said more blank than blank, even though it's lav dafka. 50 is also, if it's 50, it's also okay. And if Rav Yeshua says the same way, the other way. The Gemara now has an independent kasha on the brisa according to Rav Huna Brei Rav Yeshua, and that's as follows. Look carefully when it's exactly 3 tfachim. When your wall pieces, the sections of wall that you have are exactly 3 tfachim. So we know that the halacha is that if it's less than 3 tfachim, then you got to have lavud. If you don't have lavud, it's no good. That means that when it's less than 3 tfachim, if the gaps between the wall pieces that you have are equal to 3 tfachim or greater, so you missed that lavud. There's no lavud anymore once the gap is 3 tfachim. The lavud's gone, and therefore it's no good. That's as long as the wall pieces are less than 3 tfachim wide. What if it's exactly 3 tfachim wide? So if it's exactly 3 tfachim wide, so you don't need lavud anymore. It gets to the sugya of, do you need more air than wall or more wall than air? However, according to Huna Brei of Yeshua, if it's exactly 50-50, if the gaps are equal to the walls, it's still no good. So that means when the wall pieces are exactly 3 tfachim, you still can't have 3 tfachim of gap. Because if you have 3 tfachim of gap, it'll be 50-50, it'll be equal size gap to wall, and it'll be no good. So therefore, the Gemara asks, the Brisa should have put 3 tfachim where the wall pieces are exactly 3 tfachim should be put together with below 3 tfachim, because in both those cases, both 3 tfachim and below 3 tfachim, it's no good, the wall is no good if your gap is 3 tfachim or greater. When it's less than 3 tfachim, your wall pieces, it's no good because you lose your lavud. When it is exactly 3 tfachim, it's no good because you don't have lavud, and you can't use aymid meruba because you don't have, because it's 50-50, and 50-50 is no good according to Rav Huna Brei, the Rav Yeshua. According to Rav Papa, I understand. According to Rav Papa, when your wall sections are 3 tfachim, then if your gap is exactly 3 tfachim, it's good. If your wall sections are slightly smaller, then if your gap is 3 tfachim, it's no good because you need lavud and you don't have lavud anymore. But according to Rav Huna Brei, Rav Yeshua, you should put this together with the smaller sizes, why is it listed together with the larger sizes? And the Gemara answers, you're right, it's just as puzzle, but it's a different reason. When the wall sections are smaller than 3 tvachim, the problem is you don't have lavud. That's why it's no good. When the wall sections are exactly 3 tvachim, the problem is that when it's 50-50, it's the same as if it's more gap than wall, and more gap than wall is no good. It's just as possible, but it's different reasons, and therefore we did not list them together. Gemara now asks, which Tana is the author of this brisa? Because it seems strange. You have a famous machlokes about lavud. Lavud, we know, according to the Rabbanon, works up to 3 tvachim gaps, not including 3 tvachim. According to Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, it works up to just less than 4 tvachim gaps. This brisa seems strange. On the one hand, it says lavud works up to just under 3 tvachim. That sounds like the Rabbanon. On the other hand, it gives you rules that are different up to 4 tvachim. It says up to 4 tvachim, you're not allowed to plant on the other side of even the wall sections. According to the Rabbanon, which were this brisa must be because it has lavud up to 3. There is no distinction between 4 tvachim size walls. Where do you ever see 4 tvachim being any significant number according to the Rabbanon? So the answer to this is machlokes Abaye and Rava. According to Abaye, it's all Rabbanon. Where do you get a distinction of 4 tefachim? No, the Rabbanan do agree that there is a significance to a 4 tefach wall. It's not good enough for lavud, but there is a significance to a 4 tefach wall, and therefore you're allowed to plant on the other side of the wall section if it's at least 4 tefachim, even though you have more gap than wall. Now, Rava answers differently. Rava says it's all Rav Shimon ben Gamliel, and therefore the share of lavud is 4 tefachim, but Rav Shimon ben Gamliel only gives a share of lavud of 4 tefachim when it's up in the air, like the crossbeam at the top of the mavoi. Down on the floor, he's worried about the goats. We know that the problem with lavud is that it's a big enough gap for a goat to walk through, and that's not called a wall. So if it's down on the floor, there Shimon ben Gamliel agrees that the share of lavud is 3 tefachim, not 4 tefachim. Okay, that's the end of the Gemara's second raya, and this machlokes are of Papa and Rav Huna. Beit of Yeshua, now the Gemara goes to the third raya, and that's a brisa which we've seen earlier. The brisa says as follows: so if you have walls that has a lot of, that's mostly doors and windows, it's kosher as long as you have more wall than gap. So Gemara says, what do you mean? If it's mostly windows and doors, how do I have more wall than gap? And the person says, no, okay, you have to change. It's not sheruban, it's sheriba. It's not that it's mostly, just that it has a lot of windows and doors, but it still has to be more wall than gap. And then the Mishnah continues, the Brisa finishes off and it says, and this is as long as you have more wall than gap. So you see clearly you have to have more wall than gap. If it's 50-50, it's no good. So it's a clear proof to Eruvin Daf Yeshua. The Gemara says, got it, good. Well, the halacha is like Rav Papa anyway. Versus how could it be? We have a kasha and the halacha is like him. And the Gemara answers because our Mishnah, which we most recently saw, seems to be like Rav Papa, because there it said as long as you don't have more gap than wall. That indicates that and that's a Mishnah. If you do not have more gap than wall, that's okay. That indicates like Rav Papa that if it's exactly even gap in wall, it would be okay. Okay, we now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses making walls that are made of only horizontal ropes or only vertical sticks, using the principles of lavud. So first of all, the Mishnah says you can make a wall all the way around, made out of ropes going all the way around, almost like a ring for boxers, a boxing ring. You have these ropes going all the way around. As long as you have lavud between these horizontal ropes, it's not a problem. How do you do that? You could do it if you have 3 ropes. The space between the ropes has to be less than 3 tvachim, so it's slightly less than 3 tvachim, and the ropes themselves have to combine to a thickness wider than 1 tefach plus 3 tiny drops. Why is that? Because you need to get to a height of 10 tvachim. So if you have 3 spaces from the floor to a rope, and then to the next rope, and then to the next rope, those 3 spaces are each slightly less than 3 tefachim, so that's slightly less than 9 tefachim. Then you have to have another tefach in the rope, plus you have to fill the gap. So you get to 10 tefachim, that's okay. So there you could have a horizontal ropes making a wall. You could also have vertical. You could have a bunch of sticks stuck in all the way around. As long as the space between the sticks is less than 3 tefachim, you have lavud, and it's a wall going all the way around. Now, significant about this wall is that they're both either horizontal sticks or vertical sticks. It's not both horizontal and vertical. This is what's called a mechitza gerua. It's a bad wall. Now, we do not allow, according to some opinions, a bad wall except under certain conditions. Now, this Mishnah is coming on the heels of the last Mishnah, which is discussing a bunch of people traveling together in a caravan, and they stopped because this is what they needed to do. So the question is, where is this bad wall? You have only horizontal or only vertical. Where is it good? So it's a three-way machlekes. According to Yosi Bar Yehuda, it's not good anywhere. It's not good at all. This Mishnah is not true. It's not good even for a large group. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's good here. Only for a large group. If it's for an individual by himself or for two people, you can't use this funny wall. And according to the Chachamim, it's good in all circumstances. Even for one person by himself is allowed to build a wall like this, not a problem. Okay, so now the Gemara first wants to discuss Emin Meruba al Haparotz in a horizontal scenario. Then we'll get to the discussion of the weak wall and how it works. So the Gemara says that Rav Hamnuna asked a Shaila, when you have a wall made out of horizontal ropes going all the way around, so we said you could use lavud. The question is, could you use Aymin Meruba al Haparotz? Could you use more wall than gap enough to make it into a complete wall? So the Gemara wants to know what's the case. How does such a thing work? So Abaye wants to offer, well, maybe I'll have my ropes. I'll have my 3 ropes, but I'll leave a gap between one of the ropes from the other 2 will be 4 tvachim. They'll be too big to be lavud. So now, the other 2 ropes are close enough to the ground, let's say, so that I have lavud, and that's if I have a solid wall of 6 tvachim. Then I have a gap of 4 tvachim, and I get to my next rope, and altogether it's 10 tvachim, but I need to use Aymin Meruba al Haparotz here. I need to use my 6 tvachim being greater than my 4 tvachim to be able to consider the entire thing closed. So Abaye says this is going to be problematic, because where are you going to put the 4 tefach gap? I have 3 ropes, so I have 3 gaps. I have ground, 3 ropes, and then that means there are 3 gaps between the ground and the 3 ropes. How is this arranged? Where is the 4 tefach gap? If it's at the top, meaning the bottom rope is within 3 tefachim of the ground, and the next middle rope is within 3 tefachim of that, and then I have a 4 tefach gap, and then I get to the top rope, that's problematic, because that top rope is canceled. It disappears, because you want to use Aymin Meruba there, but you have too much space. You have more space than the thickness of the rope on both sides of that rope. Below the rope is more than the thickness of the rope, and above the rope is more than the thickness of the rope. We know the rule is whenever you have more space on either side of the solid part, it's canceled and it disappears. We say aseh avira, so that can't work. So maybe you want to tell me that the 4 tefach gap is on the bottom between the floor and the lowest rope. That's not going to work either, because there a goat could walk right through. We know the rule. When a goat could walk through, it's called mechitza teluya. It's called a hanging wall. It's no good. You can't use Aymin Meruba in a situation like that. You can't use wall greater than gap. So what must be, it's in the middle. I have the bottom rope is within 3 tefachim of the ground. The middle rope is within 3 tefachim of the top rope. But between the bottom rope and the middle rope is a 4 tefach space. There you have a problem. You have another problem, because that means that your top section has lavud, your bottom section has lavud, your top section is a 3 tefach wall, your bottom section is a 3 tefach wall, in between you have a 4 tefach gap. You want to close that 4 tefach gap by 2 smaller walls. Each section of wall is smaller than the gap that's between it. That's not a clear Aymin Meruba. It's not clear you could use greater wall than gap there, because the greater section of wall is not solid. It's broken. You have to combine the 2 sides. Now, it's a question we had earlier in the Masechta which remained unresolved. So are we assuming here that that's resolved? What's this shaila over here? The Gemara says that was not Rav Hanuna's discussion. Oh, he was talking about something else. He was referring to where you have a mat, and you're installing this mat vertically to serve as a wall. Now, the mat was 7 tvachim wide, and therefore it stands 7 tvachim high. And the problem is that you gouged out a little bit more than 3 tvachim of the gap. So you have about 4 tvachim above it, and you have a tiny little bit below the gap. So you're installing this wall, this mat, with the gap side close to the wall. You don't have to worry about the goats, because you do have a little bit of wall at the bottom under the gap, but then you have a gap of more than 3 tvachim, and then you have a greater section of actual wall made up by the part of the mat which is still there. So you have more wall than gap vertically, and you don't have to worry about the goats on the bottom. That was the question, and that was the issue, and that is what we wanted to know what the halacha is over there. Now, Rav Ashi says no, that this wasn't the question at all. The whole question was really about the case of a mechitza teluya, where you have walls that have a space under it that's greater than 3. You're assuming it's obvious that it's no good because the goats could walk through. The question is that true? That was a question that was discussed, and on that the Gemara brings that Rav Tavla asked this question from Rav, and his answer was you can't use a hanging wall with a larger than 3 tefach gap at the bottom anywhere except over water. Over water, we allowed you to draw water. You lower the pail to the water surrounded by walls that are hanging in the air and have a greater than 3 tefachim gap from the bottom. A special cooler was made for water. Other than that, we do not allow it. Okay, the Gemara now moves on to discuss the discussion of the weak wall, a wall which only has vertical or only has horizontal, but not both vertical and horizontal sticks. And we had seen in our Mishnah there was a three-way machlokes. According to the Rabbanan, that's good for everybody, even for an individual. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's not good for anybody. And according to his father, Rabbi Yehuda, that's only good for a large number of people. So the Gemara has brises here that have other opinions stated in the name of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda seems to say that that is no good is only if it's a large area, if it's a base sosayim, that's enough land to plant 2 saw of grain, which is about 5,000 square amos. So this wall is no good for a larger area than that, but it is good for an area that size. And Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda also says it's no good. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda also seems to say that it's only no good for a large area like that. As a matter of fact, the Bryce of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says as follows. It says if you have one person by himself or 2 people together, this weak wall only works up until 5,000 square amos. More than that, it doesn't work. However, if you have 3 people, that counts as a group. Then they get up to 6 saw land, which is 3 times as much, so it's 15,000 square amos. So Gemara says, you're right. This entire discussion in this Mishnah of who says what is okay is talking about greater than a base of time, greater than 5,000 square amos. Less than that, everybody agrees it's okay, even if you have a weak wall. So now the Gemara gets into what halach is. The Gemara says Rav Nachman, in the name of Rabbeinu Shmuel, got up and he gave a drasha. And he said that halacha is that if you have 1 person or 2 people, you can only have this weak wall up to 2, so up to 5,000 square amos. If you have 3 people, then you can have up to 15,000 square amos, up to 6 saw. So Gemara says, well, he's passing like a base of Rabbi Yehuda against the Chachamim. Why would he do that? It's a yachid against the Rabbim. So Gemara says he realized a mistake, and he got up and he gave a drasha again, and he said, I said the wrong halacha. The right halacha is as follows. 1 person and 2 people, you can only have up to 2 saw, up to 5,000 square amos, same as he said before. 3 people or more, then you can have any amount, not limited to 6 saw to 15,000 square amos. So the Gemara said, well, now he has a split psak. He's not like the Rabbanan, and he's not like Rabbi Yehuda. The first, if it's for 1 person, 2 people, it goes like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. If it's for 3 people, he goes like the Chachamim. The Gemara says, yes, correct, because since in this halacha for these 2, Rabbi Yehuda agrees with Rabbi Yossi, his son, therefore he paskin like them about that. However, when it comes to a larger number for the Rabbim, there he goes with the Rabbanan, because Rabbi Yehuda doesn't agree with Rabbi Yossi, and there he says that you're allowed to have any amount, you're not limited to 6 saw, which is 15,000 square meters.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.